we're going to start today, and I just want to give you a little bit of a background. Last year, Kavi and I were discussing, and when we saw projects for eYantra, I realized that product management as a subject matter is not covered in colleges because it is not that much relevant. It's a slightly later year phenomena. But since you are now getting into a situation where you actually have a prototype which you are thinking of taking to market or planning to do that, uh, you know, Kavi and I felt that we should bring product management into the curriculum, and we must share all the knowledge about product management before we expect you to use it. And nothing, nobody better than Jatin Parekh. I'll give you 2 minutes information, introduction about him and what he's going to cover today. Uh, Jatin and I go back to 1995, and I don't want to go into the history, but I'll just share with you one of the leading banking products in the world. First time, he's the original architect of that, and that product was finally acquired by Citibank, and it's all over the world today. It's today under Oracle, umbrella, Oracle Financials. The banking product is the architect number one. Number two, in Mojo Networks, which is a company we created for largely massively scalable secure Wi-Fi, and we started with security first, and then we got Wi-Fi. Jatin joined us at the very early. He was probably the second or the third, of the core team, other than the founder. In fact, one of the founders came on board later than Jatin, so he's like a de facto founder. So that was in January 2003 to till today's. He's the global head of Wi-Fi product for Arista Network, which is a large Fortune or S&P 500 company headquartered out of Silicon Valley. And Jatin does this job from Mumbai for Wi-Fi product. The third thing I'll mention to you is right from passive components like resistor, capacitor to transistors to ICs to radios, all the way to COBOL and operating system, there is nothing that Jatin does not know hands-on. तो आई हैव हैड सिचुएशंस विथ हिम, बोले यार ये इस मेजरमेंट का ये रेडियो नहीं मिलेगा, इसमें ऐसा नहीं होगा, इस टाइप का ट्रांजिस्टर नहीं है, ये आईसीए नहीं काम नहीं करेगा, इसका पावर रिक्वायरमेंट नहीं है, इसके लिए जो सॉफ्टवेयर लिखा हुआ है ये सॉफ्टवेयर नहीं काम करेगा, and so he covers everything. He also understands the electronics ecosystem out of China and Taiwan very well. He understands SaaS very well. So we have probably one of the best product managers to share with us the product management. So take as much out of him as you can. Today, Jatin is going to cover overall umbrella, if I can put it, a primer. Then over next 3 to 4 sessions, he is going to dig deeper. And along with him, if not today's session, later we're going to do the exercises. And those exercises will primarily be around your projects. And when you see what he covers, we will all quickly realize the gaps in what we have done. And let's try to fill in those gaps during these, 11, 12 sessions that Kavi and Lohit has put together for us. So Jatin, over to you.
Thank you, Kiran. You've been very kind and overly generous with my intro. So the product management is a field which is what I did not join it with a conscious mind. In fact, I used to do demos for at that time a company called Citicorp Information Technology Industries Limited. I used to go around the world demoing our back office banking product, and what I realized is that a product never fits 100% whenever you go to any customer. If you get 70% fitment, you should be more than happy. So what do you do about the rest, right? And that's when I started collecting information, talking to engineering, talking to sales, talking to the management to say, okay, this is where I think the industry is moving. And that's how I sort of learned product management. So I do not have formal education in product management, but this is something that I learned over a period of time. And then I decided to make it my profession. And that's how I sort of got around doing it. See, one of the if you ask somebody, right, what are the basic functions within an organization, right, within a product organization. So people will say, you have to do R&D. If you're doing something new, there'll be something new that you are going to do. You have to try it out. You have to do prototypes. You have to understand the nuances. So you need R&D. You need engineering to, productize the idea. You need marketing to be able to tell the world what you're doing. You need sales, right, to go and sell this product out there in the market. Then you need operations. So today, a bulk of the products will be in some way connected to the cloud, right? Even if they're not connected to the cloud, there'll be some level of operations that you need to do to make sure that things from logistics to import, export, making sure that the devices are manufactured in time, making sure that you have stocking, where do you warehouse them, how do you supply it to different parts of the market, etc. So there is a bulk of operations, not just physical operations, which include logistics and things like that, but also cloud operations. And now there is this new term in this industry called AI ops, which I'm struggling to understand even now because we always do it. But AI and ML seems to be like two things that people put into everything. Even if you make rotis, you put AI ML into it. So I think AI ops is the new term in the market. But operation is something that has been required for every product organization. And then at the end of the day, you need technical support, right? So when you look at all of these functions together, right? What you realize is that each of these functions have a different objective in mind. Marketing wants to say the best thing, right? And they even sometimes enhance the truth. They actually sort of take the truth and stuff to it, like putting mirchi masala before they kind of go out to the market and tell them what they are. Sales will promise things that you don't have because they want the end customer to buy your product. They'll say, okay, yeah, we'll do it. We'll do this, we'll do that for you. Our product will have this feature next year, whatever, right? They will go and sell. Engineering is more interested in making sure that the product is rock solid. They have done everything that they need to do. They will say, okay, we can do this, we cannot do this. It's it is something that from a outside perspective looks as if it's holding you back. R&D wants to look at new things, add new things to the product, which may or may not be, something that the market needs right now. So all of these people are trying to drag the organization in very different directions. And the one function that actually keeps everything together is product management, right? Product management is something that has to interact with all of these functions and make sure that everything is in sync. There is a level of synergy that happens between all of these groups, and you don't end up sort of stretching the organization in one way or the other. Effectively, the success of the product really depends upon the product management, and that's sort of the overarching role that the product management has to play. Now, product management can be a separate function, or there can be some individuals within the organization that do the product management role. But a role like this is very, very important. So where does this whole product management really come from? So if you look at the different things that you have to do to make sure that your product is successful, right? You have to do things in a lot of different areas like marketing, strategy, business, the planning, different programs that you need to run, how ready is your product, how do you support the product? And all of these sort of go from strategic on the left-hand side to tactical on the right-hand side, right? So, when you kind of create a product, you need to really look at all of these aspects. And obviously, this is a big list, right? Which ranges from how do you support your product, how do you, have the sales tool, or how do you train people to sell your product, to, how do you define the market, how do you, define a distribution strategy, how do you do a win-loss analysis. So this actually ranges from quite a bit, and it's like you need to do all of these things. But the way the market has evolved, right? The top the top left side is what comes under product strategy, right? This is a function that is very close to the CTO and the CEO of the company, right? And this is where you decide what the product is going to do, how is it going to do it, and what are the problems that this particular product is going to solve, and how you're going to take it to market. Then the sort of the left bottom part is what is called technical product management, where you're looking at, what do other people have? Are you able to compete against them? What's your roadmap? What are the innovations that you can bring to the table? What are the requirements that you have gathered from the field? How do you fit that into the product roadmap, etc.? And this is more of an inward-facing role, right? This is something that you do in-house. And you take feed from a lot of other functions within the company. And then there is this whole function called product marketing, which is on the top right side, or the entire right side, which is a very tactical function in terms of how do you execute. So all of the things on the right side is more about execution on a day-to-day basis. So this is what is the entire sort of market model of managing a technology product. Now, a bulk of this is applicable to non-technology products as well. But this is how it's all defined. Now, this actually is not my sort of this thing. I've picked it up from a sort of a group called the Pragmatic Marketing Group, which is actually pretty interesting. Anybody who's interested in product management should actually sign up at Pragmatic Marketing, and they have a lot of courses and other things. So I'm in no way related to Pragmatic Marketing, but I stole this particular background slide from them. The product strategy, technical product management, product marketing, and my definitions, but the background slide is from Pragmatic Marketing. So this is how you define the different roles that you need to do to make sure that you are able to position the product, define the product, sell the product, continue to sort of move forward. So when you look at product management as a function, what are your activities? What is that you need to do on a day-to-day basis when you are a product manager? And as I said, this is not something that one person or one team has to do. You can distribute these functions within the team, and some people do something and some people do something else, but as long as they all work together, it will make sense. So the first thing that the product management has to do is to internalize the vision and mission. Unless you are convinced of the vision of the company and the mission of what you are setting yourself out to do, this is not going to work, right? Unless you believe in it, unless you are a party to the definition of these items, and you agree and you sort of internalize this, it's not going to go anywhere. And if, as a product manager, you don't believe in something that the company is trying to do, you have to voice it. You have to make sure that you are in sync with where the entire organization is going. The next thing that you have to do is you have to listen to customers and market. This is something that a lot of early startup guys sort of miss doing. You have a wonderful idea, you have seen this pain point somewhere in the market, you decide, oh, I'm going to solve this problem, and then you become so passionate about this idea of yours, right, that you are trying to solve, you forget to listen to others. So remember, you are not going to pay for it at the end of the day when it goes to the market, or you are not the person who is going to fund it, even if you want to do a startup, right? It's going to be somebody else. And unless you listen to your markets and who your prospective customers are, you'll be completely lost. So the first thing that you need to do is to make sure that you listen to the market. You kind of pitch your idea to people. You say, this is what I'm going to build. Hear to what they have to say. And when I say listen, that particular word has been used, there's been a lot of thought gone into using the word listen, because the idea here is not to, justify your idea or to contest what the end user is saying. All right? Here, you should just go and listen and hear their ideas and make sure that you understand what they're trying to say, rather than, because I've seen this, a lot of startup guys do this, when they come and say, oh, I have this idea and this is how it's going to work. And you say, okay, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I don't think this is going to work. And suddenly they're like, no, this is going to work because of this is going to work because of that. Then you kind of close yourself to all these sort of, different sort of views that you are getting from the market. Now, you don't have to take what everybody is saying. I'm not saying that you just take what everybody is saying, but listen to them and make sure that you think through those items and just don't dismiss it or don't sort of overlook it because you think because you have the passion. So you have to leave your passion behind when you listen to your customers and your market.
Can I ask you a question here?
Sure. Yeah.
And it's based on real life. Sometimes happens that the idea is first time is kind of inventive, which
Yes.
market has not tried,
Mhm.
and the current state of the art, the way people do it, is doesn't bring this technology or this into picture. Huh?
Right.
And I
Yes.
want to give you the example of planner.
Mhm.
Right? So at that stage, listening also becomes first you have to get the idea into the marketplace with some of the customers, engage with them, tell them how to do it, and then they start using it. They come back with a bunch of ideas. Though you are the inventor or the innovator of the original idea, then the market picks it up versus a market that uses a particular type of product and then you are building another one or a better one for that.
Right. Yes. So you're absolutely right, Kiran, that there will be innovative ideas that have not been done before. It could be like a brand new thing, right? But at the end of the day, you still need to define the problem and make sure that you understand that problem. That's key. So I'll take another example, right? So when the iPod was introduced in the market, right? It was not the first MP3 player out there, right? There were a lot of MP3 players out there in the market, but everybody had like a 2 MB storage, 4 MB storage, 8 MB storage. Like 16 MB storage was like really, really hard to get and very expensive. And what and then used to be able to store, let's say, 20 songs, 25 songs. That was the kind of thing you do. And then iPod came along and they said, okay, if you kind of read that history, I don't have the link right now, but I can try and search where it is. But one of the things that really was the problem that they solved here was to say, how can I put my entire song library on this device? I don't want to be in the morning figuring out which playlist I want to listen to this morning, right? And then in the afternoon, have to connect it back to your laptop and swap the songs out. Can I store my entire music library on a device so that I don't have to do that? And that's the problem it solved. It did not solve a problem of having an MP3 player. It solved the problem of having to connect an MP3 player every day or maybe multiple times a day to change your playlist. And if you look at how they approached it, is when they went and talked to people as to what do you want in your MP3 player. A lot of people talked about a lot of things, but it took somebody like Steve Jobs to distill it down to say that I want to solve this one problem, right? In fact, iPod's MP3 to sound conversion was not the best in the market. At that time, there were a lot of players from Sony and I forget another company's name who had a much better MP3 to digital to analog conversion. iPod was not the best, but they actually solved a bigger problem that the mass market used to feel. So unless they had listened to the market, right, saying what is the problem you want to solve, right, they would have never come up with that idea. So even though you have the best engineers, you think you have the best things you can go forward with. If you listen to the market, you will understand the problems better. And that's why I think, see, that is the one again thing. If you took the example of planner, right? But it was Praveen and who was the prof from Rajas, I forget the name. And you and I were sitting in a room, and he said, "Look, can I visualize how much radiation is coming out from this radio, right?" So that was the problem that I solved using the planner, right? So really, it came out from talking to end customers, talking to people who are in the field who are doing these things, right? I could have, we were looking at radios, we were looking at how to solve the wireless IPS problem, right? But then when we talked to, I keep forgetting the name of the prof from at Rajas, he said, yes, all of this is very good, but I don't know how far my signal is going.
Narayan Mandiam.
Right? Narayan Mandiam, correct. So I think listening to your customers is really important. And that is the first thing that any startup guy who is looking at product management should do.
And the other thing I might say, Jatin, here is to engage with the users. So engage means listen to them, share with them, rather than it's
Yeah.
as you said, it is not a one-way conversation, and it's a difficult one for many
Right.
people, especially if you are very deep into, you build something, you're
Right.
very proud of it, and you expect everybody to lap it up. It doesn't happen. Actual
Right.
real satisfaction comes when they start using it, and
Hmm.
then they give you credit for it, though they participated
Correct.
in its evolution.
Right.
Perfect. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So the next thing that you need to do is to have a hawks on competition. Now we all need to remember that we are not the smartest people in the planet, right? It is not that we solve a problem and only we can solve that problem. There'll be other people who will come in and solve the problem, and the validation that your idea is a commercially viable idea, your idea is something that actually solves the real life problem, is the fact that you have competition. If you don't have any competition, then either the problem that you're trying to solve doesn't need to be solved, or you know, uh, you have kind of latched onto something that's not really important in the marketplace, because however innovative your solution is, the problem is there in the world, right? And other people will be solving the problem, not probably in the exact same way that you do, but in some other ways, and they will compete with you. So unless you go out and seek to know who is running the same race as you are, you are setting up, say, yourself up for failure, because it is possible that somebody has had a much better innovative idea than you have. You may have to make some course corrections, or you might figure out that there are way too many people in the space that you are trying to operate in. Right? Maybe they don't have the same idea, but that's something else that we'll talk about later. But the fact is that if you don't consider what your competition is doing, you are setting yourself up for failure. And once again, what happens is that once you are a founder, you are passionate about something that you have done, you feel that you have done the best job in this world, and whenever competition shows up, you are more interested in looking at where their flaws are, rather than taking a very honest look at what they have done, and is there something that you can do better. So the idea to have a hawks on competition is to make sure that you understand where the market is moving, what kind of solutions people are building, how you're going to make your solution better, rather than just trying to sort of bulldoze yourself through, because bulldozing will work when you have unlimited resources, and there are companies that have bulldozed other competition and then sort of thrown them out of the market because of just sheer power of funding or marketing or things like that. But that's not the luxury that a startup usually has, right? So you need to make sure you have a very good handle on what the competition is doing in your space. The third thing that you have to do is, see, at the end of the day, when you go to the market, right, you will engage with other people who will be selling your product. And they need to have the same passion about the product that you need to have. Maybe you guys are not at that stage yet, but this is something that people put off to the very end. And that's why I want to bring it up early. Is that as soon as you see that you are getting some traction in the market, you need to start engaging with people who are going to talk to end customers. That now these might be employees, this could be other sales channels, this could be distributors, resellers, whatever. But unless you start engaging with them early on, they will have other things that they can do. Yeah, sales are coin-operated people. They work for their commission. Channels have a lot of things that they sell, right? So you have to make sure that you engage with them, you keep them as passionate about your product as you are. And I just want to bring you and as I said, this may be too early for you. I just want to throw this idea out so that as you guys evolve, you know that this is something that you can't leave for the very end. The other thing that happens once you start seeing market traction is that you say, oh, I've got this product and now this is fitting everything, and let's start selling it. Let's start pitching it to investors. Let's start sort of, productizing this idea. And at that time, what happens is that you tend to sort of slow down on innovation. Initially you are very, very enthusiastic about your innovation and what new things that you are doing. And once you start going into the engineering phase and trying to get funding and trying to sort of, getting your product out there in the market, you will naturally slow down. And as a product manager, I think it's the job of the product manager, because the CEO, the sales guys will actually go down that path, and that's completely right thing to do. But as a product manager, you have to encourage and integrate innovation into the entire process. You have to tell people who are innovating, saying, how can we make this better? What else can we do in this space? Is there a side problem that we can solve using the same product, or can this product be applied to a completely different situation? So those kind of integration of innovation that you have to continuously do, and this is the activity that you need to kind of not take your eyes off. And the last thing, and a very, very important thing that a lot of product managers fail to do, is to know the engineering capabilities and strengths. Because you can have a phenomenal idea, you can have a great way to solve a problem. You could even patent your ideas. You could have 4, 5, 6 patents on your overall product. But if your engineering strength and the capabilities are not going to be able to push it through, or realize that particular sort of idea that you have, it's going to be really, really sort of challenging. So I've seen a lot of innovators giving engineering impossible problems. Now some people say that pushing impossible problems to engineering is a way to get things done, or to get a way of getting great things done. But as a product manager, but remember, that's a CEO's job, that's not a product manager's job. A product manager's job is to be pragmatic and know what can be done in what kind of time, and hence define what you can take to the market, right? Because at the end of the day, your job is to make the product successful, and you have to understand what you can and cannot do, and in what time frame you can do it, right? Given infinite resources and time, an engineering team can actually turn out anything, but you are always limited in terms of your engineering resources, and you are always going to be limited in terms of time. And you have to figure out what's the right balance to bring in, and in what order you need to kind of take things to the market. So these are the activities that you need to kind of make sure that you do a little of these, each of these items every day as a product manager. You just need to keep your eyes on all of these things.
Jatin, I have left some comments. Maybe you want to see them. There are 3 comments.
I'm actually looking at the presentation, so I have not seen the comments. Let me check. Give me 1 second.
The first one is basically recapping what you said. And then the second and the third one may be interesting for you to comment on.
So the second one, you're saying, Kiran, that ergonomics, cost economics, aesthetics are also part of the glue and the life cycle. The biggest impact comes from customer experience of using the product. You're absolutely right, Kiran. And we will elaborate on this on one of the sort of later sessions. Yes, but you're absolutely right that if the cost doesn't match what the market is willing to pay, then the market can take a sort of inferior product because of cost constraints. So that definitely happens. So cost is one of the key things. Ergonomics and aesthetics are also very, very important. You are absolutely right. And if you look at aesthetics, right, this does happen a lot in end consumer products, a little less in sort of products that go towards industry. But you're absolutely right. So one of the examples that I will take is that I was actually watching the videos of all the 11 participants. One of the things that I saw was the sort of alarms for flooding, right? And one of the things I realized is that you put a sort of alarm on a pole, and then there was a sort of a water container, right, which you are using to actually collect the water to kind of decide what is the water level. Now some of these things you could actually integrate inside the pole to which you are tying the alarm, right? And that would be a great aesthetic improvement to that. The other thing to actually, I was thinking at that time is that in a country like India, like it or don't like it, the pilferage happens, right? People see a nice item in the open, they take it home, right? I see this in Mumbai locals every day. People take the lamps that are inside the train coaches home. They don't realize that these lamps are not going to work on 220 volt supply, AC supply that you're going to get. It requires like a 400 volt DC supply to operate, right? These lamps are not going to work at your home. But the Central and Western Railways in India has to change 5 crore worth of lamps every quarter. Do you know that? That's the cost of replacing lamps inside local trains in Mumbai. So you have to think about that as well in this situation. So that I was thinking. So yes, you're absolutely right, Kiran, that these are the kind of things that you definitely need to do. And then if the end user doesn't like your product, using it twice, thrice, in fact, I would say out of the box experience, Kiran, is one of the very, very key goals, right? So if you, let's say you're, I'll take an example. If let's say you are selling something as simple as a coffee mug, okay? And if you open up the kind of box of the coffee mug, and you cannot pull out the coffee mug unless you rip out the kind of what do you call it, either the cardboard or whatever you packed it with. You would have used that to make sure that the coffee mug doesn't break during transit. But think about something who buys 6 coffee mugs and has to kind of rip off that cardboard for all the 6 months. There'll be a hesitation to buy it next time as compared to a coffee mug that's easy to kind of take out, right? So the small things like that matter, and we'll go through some of these things, right? As a, you know, it actually requires much more time than what you talked
Yeah.
about. But you absolutely right about these things.
I think you have to
Jatin,
just make everybody aware of these things, that you be
yeah,
aware
Jatin,
that they matter.
Right. Yes.
I think Jatin, you brought out a very, very, very important point, which we seldom, especially if we are students, even think about. Like a number of teams which are here have proposed some kind of artifact which is deployed in the field to measure rainwater, to measure something or the other, and all that. Right? In so doing and in so designing, right, I don't think anybody has thought of brass tacks and ground reality, especially in a country like India. You know, if you keep some artifact on the road in Netherlands and all that, there's a good chance when you come back in the evening, it'll still be there. Okay,
Yeah.
but in a place like Bombay on Marine Drive, they are stealing plastic dustbins, right?
Right.
So there's a good chance that anything that looks interesting or technical or whatever is not going to remain deployed out there unless it's kind of properly, held down. In fact, they are stealing cast iron manhole covers.
Yeah.
So apparently the BMC is changing them to either concrete or the fiber ones.
Fiber
So it's
ones,
a very
correct.
important point.
And Kavi, I think, and I'll give a couple of examples to everyone, and Jatin knows about it. I think, the look and feel and its first experience of usage, even if it's simple, does make a big difference in their accepting the product. I'll give one example. Jatin, you remember that investment bank where it was an husband-wife team?
Yes.
Their IIT, then IIM, they started investment bank, and the wife did not like the gray color of our access point. She liked
Right.
Alpha because they had a pink color access point, and she loved that. Now, when I came back, Professor Deepak Gupta said, "What the hell is in the color? It works." I said, "Well, you and I can argue all day long, but she picked the one that looked good to her."
So now, Kiran, that is one extreme example. But even if you take a real life example, right? If you go to, let's say, a hotel lobby, they will never put the access points like somebody will put inside an office. That access point has to merge with the decor. It has to, sort of either be invisible or, has to have the same curves and the same kind of feeling as the rest of the decor, right? So unless it does that, then a hotel is not going to buy our access point. That's one thing. But
Exactly.
Kiran, one thing that I think I should point out here is that even if you're looking for funding and if you're going to demo your prototype, right? And if you have a box with sellotape and you've kind of, it actually creates a first impression that says that, oh, this prototype is not ready. I would at least take, acrylic sheets, cut them out properly, put the box inside that, glue it up in a way that the glue doesn't look very bad. Even if it's a very crude prototype, when you are going to demo it to an investor who's got
Right.
15 minutes for you,
Right.
I think you need to take the time and make it visually appealing, and that's very important.
Yeah, and I will give, Jatin, I'll give an example. See, all of you guys, I am an engineer, but I've always been pushed into business development and sales. And our first product which we took, first product from the wireless security was installed in TCS headquarters, and which was a heritage building. And we didn't have a very good looking product. It was a rectangular box with a black antenna. Now we had to go with the interior designer and the architect of that TCS corporate office and make sure that if the sensor they were deploying looked ugly, she created an artifact around it. So here was an advanced customer who knew functionality is good. Here was an advanced customer who knew that first round will not be as clean and good looking as it is. But they also understood that we were sensitized. I never said that my sensor looks beautiful. I said next time it will be, it just come out because we don't have the inventive one. It took us 3 days to go 4 floors and deploy 36 sensors. Now engineers कहते हैं उसमें कौन सी बड़ी बात है यार, इतना क्या दिमाग नाटक कर रहे हो? But that's the real life outside when you take your product to the market. So idea here is to just make you guys aware that this is not something that we are saying out of the textbook. There are real life examples where we have gone through as founders and got aware, engaged with the customer. You may not have like Jatin is saying, you may have only a Cellotape to Pixotape, but make it look decent. That's the main thing. Don't make it look ugly first time, because that's when the disconnect happens. I think,
So, Kiran, I think this is a very important point about communication in general. Whether you are doing a Viva, you should be properly dressed just to show the examiners that you care, basically. Similarly, in this case, that you really care about the impressions. That's why you make it look good. Otherwise, people feel insulted.
Let me move to the next slide. If there are no more questions.
I'd like to just add here is that let's not give this role of CTO and product manager and all that too much importance at this stage. It's actually a function which could be done by the entire startup team also at this stage.
No, absolutely. And then, as I said, who does this function is not important. It is what is it that you are supposed to do. Because see, vision and mission, that will be the CEO who kind of does that, right? The sales, whatever, VP of sales will engage with sales and channel. So, different people can play this role, but these are the activities that need to happen. So what are the deliveries from a product manager? What the product manager have to deliver to the organization? So one of the key things, and this is something that I can never, underemphasize, is to prioritize, right? Every startup has wonderful ideas. They know what they want to do. They know what to solve. They know how to solve it. Everything is great. But remember, you will never be able to do this in a timely fashion, within the cost budget, unless you decide this is what I'm going to do first and this is what I'm going to do next. Here is something that I can sacrifice to speed up these things. This is something that is a very, very key role that a product manager has to do. Now, this will pitch a product manager against people like the CEO, people like the whoever is heading sales, and the CTO, where they will have their ideas, they want to do it. But at the end of the day, the product manager knows what the market wants. Remember everything else that we talked about. So he knows what the market wants. He knows what will sell. Or if you're looking at a startup, he knows what the investors will lap up, on what item will they put the money on. And hence, this prioritization is something that I can never underemphasize. This is the first role of the product manager. They have to tell even the CEO of the company saying, Mr. CEO, this has to wait. This will not come tomorrow. I know this is your pet feature, but I think this is what needs to go to the market first. And unless you feel empowered to do this and challenge everybody right from the CEO down, I think you are not a product manager unless you are willing to do this. And this is something that is so key and the hardest thing. You can take it from me. I've been doing product management for the last 20, 22 years in my life. But this is something that the hardest thing to do ever is to, unless startup, if you are doing this function, you are against your peers, right? You're telling them, look, this has to wait, and it will be somebody's pet feature or somebody's pet item, and you will get into fights, you will get into arguments, but this is your job. And what comes out of this prioritization is a roadmap, right? It's like, we are going to do this today, and we'll do this tomorrow, right? And that is something that you need to own and publish and keep changing on a regular basis, because roadmap will change. You will find new features. You will find that you did not understand the problem well. You will find that there's a better way to solve the problem. You might decide that there's an adjacent market where you can apply this particular solution to, and all of that will change. So roadmaps are actually living documents that should change as often as necessary, but you need to maintain this and you need to be able to continue to change this and be able to pitch it to people like investors, people like bankers, because At the end of the day, nobody funds you for what you already have because you already have it. You don't need funds for that. You need funds for your roadmap. And this roadmap could be not just product roadmap, it could be how do you go to market, how do you scale up, how do you go to adjacent markets and things like that. So this is a roadmap that a product manager owns, and this is something that will change, and this will be something where people will actually challenge you, saying, "Kal to ye bola tha, aaj ye kaise change ho gaya?" And you have to know that that is going to happen. And this is something that will be the outcome of this prioritization process. The third thing that is very, very important for the product manager to do is pricing. But you need to know at what price this will sell, what is the value that you are bringing to the table, what is the cost of not solving this problem, and hence you can do this. Now, one very easy way is something called cost pricing. Cost pricing is something that says, okay, for me to manufacture this, it takes me 100 rupees. So let me sell for 150 rupees because I get 50% margin. That's a great margin. Nobody in the market gets it. If I sell it for 150 rupees and my cost of goods sold are 100, I'm good. But that is something that a startup should never do, because once you cost price yourself, you are actually competing. You will very soon compete against people who can execute better than you can, and they will drive the price down, and your margins will always be under pressure. You have to realize what is the value of your product, and that's where value pricing comes in, where you say, okay, if you don't solve this problem, this is what it costs you. And if you use alternative means, remember we talked about competition, right? If you use alternate methods to solve this problem, what does it cost you? So you have to be somewhere between what it costs if you don't solve this problem and what is the cost to solve this problem by other means. That is your range within which you sort of price yourself.
Jatin, it's a very important thing. I just want to share that most of the products or the finalists have done Sigma cost, Sigma CI, and therefore my price is this, which is the typical one to do it. Kavi, my suggestion, this is such an important thing, but somehow in all engineering courses, value engineering is totally missed out. Totally
Yes.
missed out. And I think it's important that, and Jatin, you said it now, it's coming from authorized source. We have, during our interview, when we were looking at the finalists, we always said that we will talk about product pricing. It's got to be value pricing, otherwise you'll get priced out in the market. And I think it's very important to figure. You optimize your cost, but pricing
Yes.
is different. Pricing is market.
Yes.
Cost is yours.
If you look at the sort of product life cycle, right? You have to start with value, because after 2, 3, 4 years, when you have enough competition in the market, it will always go down to cost pricing.
Yeah.
Because there will be somebody who will want to price it below what you are pricing. It will end up at cost pricing at a later stage. But if this is something that is innovative, something that is novel, you have to value price. That's the chance to make money. See, at the end of the day, we have altruistic sort of ambitions around everything that we do, but we also need money, because money is something that sets you free, right? If you have money, you have the choice of doing something, even if you don't make a profit out of it, right? So at the end of the day, if you want the freedom to do what you want, you need money.
Yeah.
Money brings you freedom. That's how I look at money, right? It's not about holding it. It's about having the freedom to do what you want. And you just need to make money somehow. And you will not always get grants. You will not always get funding from, ventures who are looking at things from an altruistic value perspective. So you have to value price your product, always. And you will be driven to cost pricing as time goes by. But that's the time to innovate and do something new and bring the value back into the product.
Value is a very important thing. In fact, two things I'd like to just highlight here. One is this whole thing that you mentioned of prioritizing. And I think which would be very useful, because startups are always resource constrained. They need to decide where to invest their energy and their time, and they should prioritize on the basis of, I feel, this 80-20 rule. 80% of the business comes from 20% of the portfolio or the problem or whatever it is. That's a good way to understand where to invest your energy. And this pricing is a very notional thing. Okay, it depends on it's a question of perception, right? Like Taj Mahal hotel prices are very, very high, I'm sure the cost of the product is not as high as the price, I suspect. Or take for instance, I asked Raghunath Iyer, a common friend, right? What would be the cost of an AirPod which retails for 12,000 rupees on the street, the Apple AirPod headphones, right?
Yeah.
He said about less than 100 rupees.
Yeah. No, yeah, see, Apple is a great example where they value priced everything.
Yes.
Right? So again, Kabir, really, pricing is something that you can do a whole module on if you wanted to, right? You can have like 10 to 12 hours of teaching around how to price stuff. But we're trying to cover it in short, and maybe I'll give some more insights if people are really interested on how to price stuff and how to value price stuff and how to beat the cycle where the market drives cost down to cost pricing. How to kind of emerge out of that. That is a whole sort of you could actually do a module out of it.
I think, Jatin, what we should do is, let's think through it, because I think there is a lot of organizational level dynamics that plays out. My own view is that as a CEO, if people come to me saying that, reduce the price for me to sell, I knock that person from good salesperson.
Right.
That is one part. If a partner comes to you and say, I can only sell because, so and so is offering a lower price product, that partner also loses he's not a cream color partner. So
Right.
at the same time, other thing I was saying, and I just wrote in the chat here, you never lose a deal because your price is high. If the customer has liked your product, they will come back to the negotiation table. And especially when you are a startup, they know they have some leeway with negotiations. I have seen people even say, my product is costing $1,000, but because you are my first customer, I'm giving it to you for $200.
Or even free sometimes.
And even we have seen given free, give some token price, but your price is $1,000. Your price is not $200. That is your discounted offering to that customer. Please understand this fact. List price is very high, and then Jatin will share one of our products, which was a very unique product in the market. 1 year we had the highest selling price, average selling price from India, not from US, not from Europe. Because as founders, we articulated that and people sold it beyond the list price. They articulated so well that some of our partners went beyond the list price and sold it.
Right.
So it is important to make sure. Other thing which Jatin mentioned is very important. आपको पैसे की जरूरत पड़ती है. आपको R&D सब चीजें लाइफ में पैसे से होती है. गलत सही सब होती है. If you bring more money into the company because you are pricing it well, you get elbow room on R&D, hiring, everything else, and customers value you because they are paying top rupee or dollar for your offering. They will engage with you a lot more. They want you to be successful. They'll give you references of. So, for example, you sold it to one C-level officer. That person will introduce to 5 more because they like your product. So it's I think you should take from your mind that low price sells. Even if you go wrong, that's fine. I think this message is very clear to do that. Yeah.
So, Kiran, the other thing to also realize is that when you are pitching to investors, they could be just sort of lending organizations or debt investment, or it could be equity investment, whatever it is. Right, at the end of the day, what is important is that how much money you are going to make, and the only way that you can make money is to scale. Then that is something that is wrong. So cost pricing will defeat you. Is going to be a problem if you are also pitching to investors. You need to be able to put the value and then price it at the value. The way you sort of justify your pricing is by saying that this is what it costs if you don't solve this problem, and this is what it costs when other solutions are used, and you have to be lower than what it is, what it costs, right there. You don't have to say what is the delta over what you spend.
You said a very important thing, and I think all the people to understand. Jatin said that what is the cost at the customer end of not using this technology? And if that cost is very high, even if your selling price is high, they still get good benefit. Now, it is very important to see that then you will arrive at a good price. If you see
Right.
your cost, you have to see their benefit, what they financially benefit from, and within those benefits, can you position your product? You get a lot more elbow room. We'll come back, I think, because this is the first one. Jatin, let's do one thing, Kavi. Let's put a session on pricing, I think, and we'll put some maybe an hour or so for people. I think let's try and see.
But this is a product management job, right? To make sure that this is something that you have to make sure you do. And then the sales and CEO, as Kiran said, will have wriggle room for individual deals. But you have to position yourself correctly from a price perspective, right? And then obviously, some of the things that we talked about in the previous slide, right? You have to, enable the sales and channel, and you have to be able to create product marketing and collateral. And this is something that's pretty obvious, and we can go into this later on. But I want to sort of mention here is that whatever we talked about right now are actually tactical items. These are things that you have to do on a day-to-day basis, solve it on a day-to-day basis. But then there are certain strategic things that you need to do, right? One is that you need to figure out what your market strategy is. Today, you have a solution for a problem, and you are fixing it in a way, and you have priced it right, you've gone to the market, you're selling it. But is that the end of the story, right? Are you going to apply it to adjacent markets? Are you going to improve it and solve some other problems? Are you going to improve this in a better, more efficient way as you go along? Because at the end of the day, you don't just want what you have done today, right? You want to grow from here. You want to solve more problems. You want to solve it for adjacent markets. You want to kind of have a life of its own, right? So at the end of the day, you want to see what the growth plan is. Now, market strategy is not the roadmap. Roadmap is what you are doing over the next year. Market strategy is when you like to see the product going in maybe 4, 5, 6 years time in the long run. Even if you are not there, where do you expect the product is going to go? That's market strategy. So this is something that's very important. You should be able to articulate what your market strategy is, because not only your products will change, actually the market will also change, right? You used to solve the payment systems in some way when the internet was not there. When internet came around, the credit cards, etc. I don't know how many of you have seen it. There used to be a box. We used to put a credit card in that box, and there should be a paper. You used to slide that, a slider over it, to create an imprint of your card. That's how we used to sell everywhere. And every shop had a booklet of, cards that have expired or have been withdrawn. So they check your number against that booklet to see if your card is good or bad. Now, when internet came, this completely changed, right? They would swipe it on a machine. The machine would talk to your bank. Your bank would say is the transaction authorized or not. Now, after people started getting smartphones, this changed all over again. So at the end of the day, not only your product will have to change, the market itself changes. And you have to be able to foresee some of these changes and see how your solution is going to adapt to these market changes as it goes along. So I will give you an example here is that Dinos and Masters are the only two sort of really successful surviving card companies, because they embraced the online authentication even before everybody was trying to sort of put it into the mainstream, right? So there are a lot of examples there where people who followed the market, who had a market strategy behind them, were successful in the long run, while they would have not been successful in the short run. Over the long run, they actually succeeded because they had a good market strategy. The other thing is that how do you position this product in the market? Because remember, one thing I told you is that if you don't have competition, that means there is something wrong. Competition validates your idea, okay? Because other people are trying to solve the same problem. It means that this problem really exists, and people are willing to pay money to solve the problem. But how do you then position your solution against everybody else's? How do you differentiate yourself? How do you sort of, this is something that you have to continue to do over a period of time, and that's an important thing from a strategic perspective. And then we sort of, very briefly talked about this, but you have to manage the product life cycle. Your product is not going to live forever. It will have pricing pressures, it will get technology pressures, it will get competitive pressures, it will get market pressures. and your product will die. And if you do not evolve your product, or if you do not have adjacent products, your company will suffer at the end of the day. So these are the things that you need to do at a strategic level to continue to go to move ahead. And investors would like to see these strategic items being put onto the pitch, because they know that even if this particular product has a shorter life, where is this team going to go at the end of the day? That's really important, especially if you're looking at equity funding. That is where people are taking a long-term view on your company, your team, and that's when these things become really, really important. These are the things that are a deliverable if you are a product manager. So once again, I'm open to questions. I'm trying to open this chat window. Oh, I found it.
Yeah, Jatin, there are some interesting conversations. Take a look at it.
So pricing, I think you already answered, Kiran.
Jatin, I'm also giving one example, and which is counter to what we have said so far, but I want to bring a couple of points. See,
Sure.
if you have lots of money, you can actually price your product lower and disturb the competition. Like Chinese have done it, Japanese did it with the automobile, Jio did it with the communication services, but they always had a value in their product. They had a value in the product, but they had a lot of money. Jio had a lot of money to spend on promotion. Japanese put a strategy in the 70s to compete with Americans on the automobile, and Chinese realized that electronics was their way, and they actually, flooded the world with lower cost electronics. And you can buy the best Chinese electronics, you can buy the lowest electronics. So it is possible to do that, provided you have a lot of money. Startups always don't have that money, and that is where you have to do value pricing.
So Kiran, one of the other things that is really important in this strategy that you just talked about, yes, people have used it very successfully. The other thing is the ability to scale. Just think about if Jio was not able to scale, or if Chinese were not able to scale, they would have never been able to bulldoze the market that they did, right? Even if you look at the Japanese, right, they actually were very innovative with things like just-in-time logistics, right? They were very innovative in terms of that process, right? Everything has to be done by a process. There is no scope for doing anything outside of it. If the process is inefficient, you change the process, but you don't sort of go outside the process. So if you want to bulldoze the market, you need money, but you also need the ability to scale. That is not the goal of a startup. So
I would say that 99 out of 100 startups may not have that luxury. So let's assume that, number one. Number two, speed and innovation is the core on which startups survive.
And agility, Kiran. You need to be able to change course.
Yeah, exactly. Speed, this thing you have to have. Otherwise, it doesn't, you have a bumpy road ahead of you.
The pricing questions, I think, Kiran will take a little bit later. Maybe if we have another session on it, right? I'm just going through some of these things.
I think you go ahead. I'm also making notes so that we can bring them in later also. Yeah.
So the next slide is that, what are your responsibilities of the product management function, right? I just try to distill this into 6 bullet points, right? And, you can actually sort of, enhance this a lot more. I can talk about 20 things, but if you look at the key things, what is it, right? One is you should be able to articulate the problem. If you can't define what you are solving, there's no point. And the second thing is to be able to demonstrate the solution, that you have defined the problem, this is the problem, but you should also be able to say, how does your solution solve that problem? This is the first thing that you need to be able to do, right? This is our first responsibility. The second thing is that you have to establish market fitment. Now, market fitment will come in very different ways. One is price. Is the market willing to pay what you are asking for? Even if it is cost price, if you are asking people to pay something that's well beyond their means to pay, it's not going to go anywhere. Other thing is that, is there an ecosystem where this can actually work? So, for example, the early people that came with, Paytm and these guys that you hear about them today were not the first payment solutions that came to market. There are a lot of other payment solutions that came to market, but smartphone was not something that was out there in everybody's hands, and they just died after a period of time. So, you have to make sure that there's an ecosystem where your solution can actually thrive. That's a part of market fitment. The other market fitment is about logistics, about your reach, about the ability to actually fulfill the demand that you are going to generate. If you don't fulfill the demand that you are not going to generate, somebody else is going to come around and overrun you. So market fitment means that your product actually is a fit for the market that you are going after. So this will take many forms, and you need to establish that whatever your solution is does fit the market. The other thing that you need to do is to differentiate from competition and alternate, ways to solve this problem, right? So, people may have different ways of solving the problem. So, are you cheaper? Are you better? Are you faster? Or if people are solving it the same way that you are doing, are you providing more value? Are you, let's say, are you more reliable? Are you more resilient? All of these things will come up. But you need to be able to differentiate from competition and alternate solutions out there in the market, right? You need to be able to justify the price to value from an end customer point of view. And that's what we talked about a little bit before. But here, this is an important point because you need to look at it from an end customer's point of view, right? If you are selling something to let's say, somebody who's a small farmer, is this something that that person can justify, right? So there are a lot of companies that I evaluated on the way, which used to say, let's do this, let's automate this. And a lot of time it's like, labor is so cheap in India, why would I not put 20 people and do this job, right? This one, things like automatically answering calls that coming to talk or whatever, right? Can I just train 20 people and do it? Why should I pay somebody, let's say like 10 lakh rupees and maybe, 2 lakh rupees every year to run a service when I can hire, let's say 2 people and do it for much less. So those kind of things will come in. You have to be able to justify your price to the value from the end customer's point of view, right? People who are going to pay you money. You have to ensure longevity, which means that whatever solution you have should not be something that the problem is going to go away in some time or something that's very short-lived or whatever. So I'll take an example of this, right? So we have a Wi-Fi solution today in the market which are selling. And this whole COVID thing came along. And what we realized is that we have to track people when they come to office. When there are people in office, it is actually restricted who can come into office. But even when people come into office, you need to track where they are. You need to make sure that they keep themselves separated. You need to know that they don't stay beyond a particular time. You need to know that on a particular floor, there are less than so many people on that floor at any given time. You need to track people. And what we realized is that we could have done a solution around it by using beacons, by using Bluetooth apps on your phone, etc. But then we said, how long is this going to survive? It is not a life of 1 year, 2 years. Should I put in like a 6-month development cycle and then create a solution where my end customers need to buy more equipment? Or can I just look at the Wi-Fi data and the signal strength information from people's phones that are already in their pockets, people's laptops that are already there, and build something that is not as accurate as what I would have got with a beacon or what I would have got with some app on the phone, but something that does solve my problem. I don't have to do any more investment apart from deploying a server which runs a particular software, right? So this is where you kind of say, okay, this is what I'm going to do because this is the longevity of the market or the problem. If the problem's life is longer, you have to make sure that the solution stays as long as that is. So that longevity is very important. And then market conditions will change. We talked about this before. They will be very dynamic. Problems that are there today will no longer be problems because of something else something different that completely happens, right? And you should be able to be agile enough to respond to these market conditions and morph your solution so that it remains relevant in the marketing conditions, in the market conditions that have changed. This was my last slide, and I hope this was meaningful to you guys.